Today, guys, we're going to be actually reviewing the bow in its final form. This is with the exotic catalyst, and by the way, this is the new dungeon exotic from Spire of the Watcher. It actually drops from the boss, and its exotic catalyst that drops from the master version of the dungeon. Now, big shout out here to Eclipse for allowing us to play with his account. My man's RNG is god tier. But let me just go over what this exotic catalyst actually does, and then of course some hidden things about hierarchy and what it can accomplish. First up, its exotic perk is Guidance Ring. Precision hits and final blows build Guidance Ring energy. Opposing guardians grant additional energy, and at full charge, hip firing creates a Guidance Ring. Now, its trait is Apollonic Tangent, which states that arrows fired through a Guidance Ring release seeking projectiles, which do more damage based on the distance traveled. Now, there is a cap to this. Again, once you get past like that 35 meter mark, that 30 to 35 meter mark, you're not going to be getting increased damage. And on top of that, once you get past a certain point, this bow just loses all target acquisition. Now, outside of PvP, that damage is pretty nice. It does kick things up, almost allowing you to one-shot folks when shooting through this Guidance Ring. Pretty much like 0 to 1 resilience guardians will die. But let me just be real, guys. Inside of PvP, this is not a good bow. There is so many better bows than this. I try to use it in a Crucible game. Can you get the buff? Yes. Is it hard, though, to get it going inside of Crucible, especially if you have somewhat decent enemies you're going against? Absolutely. And then on top of that, let's be real. This Guidance Ring thing, it's not the easiest thing to take advantage of. Once you set that ring, that's it. It's not like you can move the ring. Yes, it lasts for a very long time, somewhere around like 12 seconds that it lasts. But unless you've got enemies running straight at you inside of PvP, you're just not going to be able to take advantage of it all that much. Inside of PvE, though, the damage is very nice. And here are actually the damage numbers for hierarchy. Crit is 11,053, body shot being 6,917. With the ring, though, close to Coral, the single shot damage doesn't actually change. It's just the extra shots. So it's still that 11,053 every single time. But ring shot damage, when you're up close, when shooting through those rings, is 5,498 damage each. There's two of those, so that's 10,996 in total for the ring shot damage, plus your crit damage, which is 22,049. Now, when you're actually far from Coral and you reach that cap, this pretty much doubles our damage here, giving us 10,995 damage per each one of those seeking shots. So for a total of 21,990 amongst our ring shots, this brings our total to 33,043. Now, this is significant because this is like a 3-time multiplier from where we started at 11,053 per crit to where we're at now at 33,043. It's quite impressive. The biggest drawback to this bow, though, outside of its ease of use, in my opinion, is its draw time. There's a reason why people aren't that crazy about Leviathan's Breath. Wishender, which does do good damage, a lot of people don't like the draw time on that. Wishender sits at an 820 draw time. Trinity Ghoul sits at a 720 draw time, but most of us are actually shooting from the hip with that. But this is where the exotic catalyst comes in for hierarchy of needs. It's called Protocol Emergency Scramble. Deploying a Guidance Ring or striking a target with a seeking projectile improves draw time and reload speed for a moderate duration. What this is essentially is Archer's tempo, but even better, guys, because not only are you increasing or essentially decreasing that draw time, you're increasing your reload speed, and it makes the entire weapon feel substantially faster. Now, I was curious to know what the frame drops were, and I did a lot of different testing on it, guys. Essentially, though, what I found was somewhere around a 50% drop there in draw time. And we tested this multiple times, guys. It is actually a 50% drop, which is substantial. You're talking a 3-time multiplier there in damage, double the speed, and on top of that, the increase in reload speed means you're knocking that arrow up even faster. And you're seeing it right here in action, guys. It's nuts, man. On top of that, the seeking, the constant AoE damage, the ability to create Warmind cells with Wrath of Rasputin. That's right, guys. If you're rocking Wrath of Rasputin with this solar bow, because of the solar splash damage, it can present Warmind cells. Granted, I feel like the bow should do that by itself, even without Wrath of Rasputin, but whatever. I think there's a lot of things contributing, though, to the bow feeling much better, and I know that goes even beyond what we get from Archer's tempo. But again, it's a combination of both improvement to our draw time and improvement to our reload speed. What's even more amazing about this is the duration in which it lasts. It's about 6 seconds, and you'll see it at the bottom left hand of your screen. It'll say Prophetic Vector. Even after the ring runs out, though, it's not like this buff goes away. Like, if you don't have enough stacks of Guidance Ring to throw out yet another ring, you can immediately look to different targets, grab some kills or some precision hits with this big bump in its draw time speed and its reload speed. And if you're pairing this with like reload perks for bows, this is going to make the weapon feel a lot more fluid. This is a night and day difference from the experience that I was feeling yesterday during our live review. Now, some questions here about this exotic catalyst and actually the bow itself. Does Guidance Rings apply to other bows? No. We actually established this yesterday when PvP checking. I know the trait it says that arrows fired through the guidance ring releases seeking projectiles. This does not apply to other bows though, but what it does apply to is other people rocking Hierarchy of Needs. Matter of fact, Luke was on my account. He was placing guidance rings and I was placing it for him. We were both benefiting from each other's rings. So if you have a team of people rocking Hierarchy of Needs and you're all placing different rings in different locations or just chaining them together, you're giving each other substantial buffs. Not only a 3-time multiplier there in your damage, but an overwhelming increase in DPS due to that drop there in draw time and reload speed. This bow becomes more powerful the more people you have rocking it on your squad. Now I will say this, as a solo player, it is not the easiest bow to use. Actually, it can be somewhat aggravating. I found that at times, once I got guidance ring and those charges up, when I go to actually shoot a full charge, even if I was aiming down sights a lot of times, it would actually throw out the guidance ring. And sometimes I would actually waste it. And I'm like, yo, I didn't even want a guidance ring to be there. On top of that, I wish it wasn't really a ring. Like I wish it was a dome because enemies push up on you. They get around you. More so than that, I wish that it wasn't even a ring. It just required us to be within the radius or a certain radius of that ring and we still get the benefits. And we live in a world where there's lots of ease of use bows. Ticcu's Divination is a big one to compare here. Monarche, Trinity Ghoul. So without a doubt, if you're looking at Hierarchy of Needs and you're thinking, yo, this bow seems complicated, it kind of is. But I will say it is somewhat addicting once you get that damage rolling. Now, when we actually sit down and compare it to other bows, this was pretty interesting. Ticcu's Divination was the obvious one. This is honestly one of the best bows in the game. It's tracking. If you got the exotic catalyst, this increases your arrow damage. On top of that, yes, you can produce Warmind cells very easily with Ticcu's Divination. Of course, you still need Wrath of Rasputin though. But damage-wise, Ticcu's actually starts off at 14,458 detonation damage. Its crit damage is actually 9,890. And of course, you have to chain your hipfire shots to first land the projectiles and then aim down sights with the bow to actually see that detonation. So you are losing a shot, but considering like the play style of bows where you're playing so peak oriented, it works for Ticcu's here. On top of that, you really don't even have to do a draw or a full draw for the hipfire shot. It seeks out the targets, finds it. The AoE explosion on the follow-up detonation is so big, literally catches everything. It's fantastic. Now, its damage actually starts off, and we're purely going to be showing its full damage at 9,890 crit damage plus the detonation damage of 14,458. Now, that's starting off. Again, causality actually goes up in damage. You can actually see the stacks there on the bottom left hand of your screen. So we're starting off at like 24,348, ramping all the way up to 34,354. So yes, yesterday when we said that Hierarchy of Needs does out damage that of Ticcu's Divination, it does at base. But once you get stacks of that causality going, this amps the damage up substantially. And as you can see here from Ticcu's, it is surpassing that of Hierarchy of Needs. Now, if our math checks out, we are looking at a 378 draw time, which is stupid fast, versus the 580 draw time on Ticcu. But again, Ticcu has that 580 draw time at all times. You don't have to stand behind a ring. I know the overall damage here from Hierarchy is better than that of Ticcu. It really is, guys. And when you look at DPS, it is better when standing behind that ring. But the overall ease of use is just not there. Now, comparing it to a few other bows, though, we've got Monarche, which actually does damage over time. Its crit is 10,923. It does 8 ticks of damage for an additional 8,680 per shot. Again, keep in mind, still surpassing that of base Hierarchy of Needs, despite the impact differences between these two weapons. Monarche sits at like a 667 draw time. Trinity Ghoul. Now, Trinity is normally just an ad clear bow, and it does so phenomenally, especially in arc burn environments, but it splits the damage here to 3,713 per crit, so times that by 3, that's 11,139. But once you actually get Lightning Rod, this does slightly increase our damage to 13,959. Now, another bow we wanted to look at, considering we're talking about the heavy hitters, we have to bring up Wish Ender. Now, the beautiful thing about Wish Ender is that it actually does have anti-barrier built into it. Another beautiful thing about Wish Ender is its broadhead perk. It does a substantial amount of damage. Now, I know the other day I actually stated that Wish Ender was doing 1/3 of its damage. That's actually not the case. If you happen to have anti-barrier bow on, for some reason this actually breaks Wish Ender, and I guess it's because Wish Ender has built-in anti-barrier in it. Long story short though, it does 10,751 damage per crit, but with its broadhead perk, this gives you an extra 2 damage values, which is 11,367 each, giving us a total of 33,485 damage. Guys, there's no build up for this. Wish Ender, all on its own, is doing that much damage, and you don't have to actually collect charges or stand behind a ring. It has a slightly longer draw time than that of Hierarchy, but its overall ease of use is way better, and it's got built-in anti-barrier. I know the DPS is still better on Hierarchy behind that ring. But again, it's just one of those things when comparing it to all of these exotic bows. Overall ease of use is way more present with them than it is with Hierarchy. Now, Leviathan's Breath, I did want to look at that because that is our heavy hitter bow, considering it's in the heavy slot. It does 39,926 damage per crit and a detonation damage, which is quite large, at 56,022. Granted, it's a heavy. I just wanted to showcase where Leviathan's Breath sits in this. If you got the exotic catalyst, it also gives you Archer's Tempo. Not a fair comparison here, but just some extra bits of information. With that being said, the exotic catalyst on the Hierarchy is very nice, but the overall ease of use that this exotic bow has in comparison to our other bows needs to be improved. Ticcu's Divination is so good. Trinity Ghoul, so good. Monarche, fantastic. Wishender, with its already built-in anti-barrier. Yes, we can all sit here and look at gameplay from Hierarchy, and don't get me wrong, it's impressive to watch it clear a room. The problem is that Trinity Ghoul, Ticcu's Divination, and even Monarche, all three of them can clear a room just as easily. This is a really cool bow, but I feel like Bungie really dropped the ball in two different places. Number one, I felt like its overall ease of use could have been a lot better in terms of like that ring. Like I wish it would have just been something that you place, and if it didn't follow you or stay in front of the bow, like imagine if it like tracked and stayed in place in front of your Guardian. That way, wherever you looked and wherever you went for that 12-second duration, you had that increase in damage. And before people say, Cross, that would be broken inside of PvP, trust me, this weapon's overall inconsistencies when it comes to snag and crits inside of PvP, anyone that actually takes the time to try to get those stacks, by all means, they deserve to have that damage buff. And the other thing that they really messed up on is that it should have been by default creating Warmind cells, or in some ways lean into Warmind cells, considering it's a Rasputin themed weapon. Granted, I think this may actually be preparing us for a possible change to Warmind cells in the future. If you remember at TWAB way back when, Bungie actually stated that there was going to be a change for all of our mods, including Warmind cells, charged with lights, etc. So perhaps Bungie's waiting on that. But for where this bow sits, it's just going to be one of those I collect, and that's about it. And it's a shame because when you actually do place that ring and you're playing off of your teammates' rings, the weapon's damage is very beautiful to look at. And yes, it can clear the hell out of a room. It can do substantial damage to champions and chew them down. I want to be impressed with this bow. I really do, guys. Especially considering that the exotic catalyst is actually really good. I mean, a combination of reload speed and essentially Archer's Tempo. Who wouldn't want that on their bows? When we look at different exotic catalysts, Bungie knocked it out of the park when it came to bows like Trinity Ghoul, where it gave Forked Lightning, where Lightning Rod now triggers from any arc damage final blow. Or Ticcu's Divination, where it overall increased that arrow damage with causality, and striking targets unaffected by Sacred Flame instead refreshes those arrows. The only exotic catalyst amongst our bows that really wasn't that creative was Monarche, which was Unrelenting. The plus 20 there in reload speed is very beneficial on this bow. Plus, Unrelenting is pretty nice for that health regeneration when you're dealing with multiple targets, which considering the AoE damage that Monarche puts off, you can easily do. And don't even get me started on the different Void 3.0 builds you can do with Monarche. Can you do a Warmind cell build right now with Hierarchy of Needs? Absolutely. You can load out Wrath of Rasputin alongside Rage of the Warmind for those double explosions. Combine that with Global Reach to increase that radius. Match it with Burning Cells or the health benefits of Fire Team Medic. But understand where Warmind cells are now. They are much weaker than what they were. What was it? A year and a half ago? They used to be so much stronger. On top of that, that same Warmind cell build that I just gave you, you can do the exact same thing with Ticcu's Divination and never have to stand behind a ring. Understand the Warmind cells that you see being produced by Hierarchy of Needs is completely dependent on Hierarchy standing behind the ring. Those seeking arrows that you see, that's the technical solar splash damage that is dipping into Wrath of Rasputin. Now, even if this bow came out and suddenly started making Warmind cells all on its own, I still don't even know if I would want that. Again, if it's completely dependent on us taking advantage of this Guardian ring, and I will say, once you get this ring going, chaining shot after shot after shot, you can keep doing that and placing another ring after another ring. But man, I wish this ring wasn't so stationary. I wish we literally just shoot once and it tracks our Guardian and stays in front of us. That to me would make this exotic well worth the dungeon. But it looks like the text mechanical weapons are going to be the ones carrying the dungeon this season. So guys, that is my thoughts on Hierarchy of Needs. That is our review. I just wanted to clear the air because I know we did our live review yesterday. And yes, I did say that this weapon did do more damage than Ticcu's Divination, and it did at base. But Ticcu's, of course, surpassed it at causality ×5 and ×6. And then, of course, I wanted to look at our other bows. Now, if you like using Hierarchy of Needs, listen, do not let me crap on your party. I enjoyed using it too. All I'm saying is that it could have been better. And hopefully Bungie will make it better. And I will say the bow is better when you have multiple teammates rocking it, as you can all place rings for each other and everyone be benefiting from that increase in damage and an even more amped up version of Archer's Tempo and that 50% 30% increase in draw speed. But from a solo perspective, I just find the other bows to just be way, way better. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.